Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana 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 Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Gauranitai ki Jai Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki
I'd like to take a moment and introduce our guest speaker this morning. His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu is a scholar, devotee, and wonderful teacher from the Utah State University in Logan, Utah. He serves there as the chairman of the History, Religion, and Classics Department, as well as a professor of religious studies in the, who is J. Charles Redd anyway?
Oh, Charles Redd was a landowner in southern Utah, did many different businesses, and his grandson named the chair in honor of him.
I see. He's an endowed chair of religious studies there, which is a prestigious position. So we're very happy to have you here. Thank you for taking time from your travels. And he is an expert scholar in Srimad Bhagavatam, having been homeschooled basically on Srimad Bhagavatam by your mother. Right?
Yes. It's so nice to be here. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for the kind introduction. I actually lived at Krishna House many years ago, 2005, I think it was, 2005 to 2006. It was a one academic year. I was teaching, my first teaching job was at University of Florida, the Department of Religion. It was a one-year temporary teaching position, and I was lucky enough to live in one of these apartments just across this little alleyway here. And I mean, I wasn't, I guess, a full member of the team, but I was attending the morning programs and then helping clean on Saturdays or Sundays, I can't remember, the big kitchen clean. And yeah, it's really good for PhDs to clean the kitchen on a regular basis. It helps. And I really enjoyed that 1 year here, not to mention eating Krishna lunch every day, which sustained me. So it's wonderful to be back. I think I visited briefly since then, but never really spent a good amount of time here. So it's wonderful to be back here today, and thank you all for coming. So I'm going to continue where you've been reading so far, and I believe this is chapter 19 of Canto 1. The chapter is called The Appearance of Shukadev Goswami. Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So how do you do this? I believe you go around and read the translations, is that right? Yeah. Okay. Do you have a system for who reads? Or? We read to verse 24, I believe.
24? I'll start. Sri Sutta Goswami said, while returning home, the king, Maharaj Parikshit, felt that the act he had committed against the faultless and powerful Brahmana was heinous and uncivilized. Consequently, he was distressed.
King Parikshit thought, due to my neglecting the injunctions of the Supreme Lord, I must certainly expect some difficulty to overcome me in the near future. I now desire without reservation that the calamity come now, for in this way I may be freed of a sinful action and not commit such an offense again.
I am uncivilized and sinful due to my neglect of Brahminical culture, God consciousness, and cow protection. Therefore, I wish that my kingdom, strength, and riches burn up immediately by the fire of the Brahmin's wrath, so that in the future I may not be guided by such inauspicious attitudes.
While the king was thus repenting, he received news of his imminent death, which would be due to the bite of a snake bird, occasioned by the curse spoken by the sage's son. The king accepted this as good news, for it would be the cause of his indifference toward worldly things.
Maharaj Parikshit sat down firmly on the banks of the Ganges to concentrate his mind in Krishna consciousness, rejecting all other practices of self-realization, because transcendental loving service to Krishna is the greatest achievement, superseding all other methods.
The river by which the king sat to fast carries the most auspicious water, which is mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord and tulsi leaves. Therefore that water sanctifies the three worlds inside and outside, and even sanctifies Lord Shiva and other demigods. Consequently, everyone who is destined to die must take shelter of this river.
Thus the king, the worthy descendant of the Pandavas, decided once and for all, and sat on the Ganges bank to fast until death and give himself up to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who alone is able to award liberation. So, freeing himself from all kinds of associations and attachments, he accepted the vows of a sage.
At that time, all the great minds and thinkers, accompanied by their disciples and sages who could verily sanctify a place of pilgrimage just by their presence, arrived there on the plea of making a pilgrim's journey.
From different parts of the universe, there arrived great sages like Atri, Chavana, Sharatvan, Arishtanemi, Brigu, Vashishta, Parashara, Vishvamitra, Angira, Parashurama, Utaya Indrapamada, Idmavadu, Medaditi Devala, Arshiteshana, Bharadvaja Gautama, Pibalada, Mitreya, Orva, Kavasha, Kumbayoni, Dvepayana, and the great personality Narada.
There were also many other saintly demigods, kings, and special royal orders called Arundayas, a special rank of Rajases from different dynasties of sages. When they all assembled together to meet the emperor, he received them properly and bowed his head to the ground.
After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them on his decision to fast until death.
The fortunate king said, "Indeed, we are the most grateful of all the kings who are trained to get favors from the great souls. Generally, you sages consider royalty as refuse to be rejected and left in a distant place."
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the controller of both the transcendental and mundane worlds, has graciously overtaken me in the form of a Brahmana's curse. Due to my being too much attached to my family life, the Lord, in order to save me, has appeared before me in such a way that only out of fear I will detach myself from the world.
O Brahmanas, just accept me as a completely surrendered soul, and let Mother Ganges, the representative of the Lord, also accept me in that way. For I have already taken the lotus feet of the Lord into my heart. Let the snake bird, or whatever magical thing the Brahmana created, bite me at once. I only desire that you all continue singing the deeds of Lord Vishnu.
Again, offering obeisances unto all you Brahmanas, I pray that if I should again take my birth in the material world, I will have complete attachment to the unlimited Lord Krishna, association with his devotees, and friendly relations with all living beings.
In perfect self-control, Maharaj Parikshit sat down on a seat of straw with straw roots facing the east, placed on the southern bank of the Ganges, and he himself faced the north. Just previously, he had given charge of his kingdom over to his son.
Thus the king, Maharaj Parikshit, sat to fast until death. All the demigods of the higher planets praised the king's actions, and in pleasure, continually scattered flowers over the earth and beat celestial drums.
All the great sages who were assembled there also praised the decision of Maharaj Parikshit, and they expressed their approval by saying, "Very good." Naturally, the sages are inclined to do good to common men, for they have all the qualitative powers of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, they were very much pleased to see Maharaj Parikshit, a devotee of the Lord, and they spoke as follows.
The sages said, O chief of all the saintly kings of the Pandu dynasty, who are strictly in the line of Lord Sri Krishna, it is not at all astonishing that you give up your throne, which is decorated with the helmets of many kings, to achieve eternal association with the personality of Godhead.
We shall all wait here until the foremost devotee of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit, returns to the supreme planet, which is completely free from all mundane contamination and all kinds of lamentation.
All that was spoken by the great sages was very sweet to hear, full of meaning and appropriately presented as perfectly true. So after hearing them, Maharaj Parikshit, desiring to hear of the activities of Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, congratulated the great sages.
The king said, O great sages, you have all very kindly assembled here, having come from all parts of the universe. You are all as good as supreme knowledge personified, who resides in the planet above the three worlds, Satyaloka. Consequently, you are naturally inclined to do good for others, and but for this, you have no interest, either in this life or in the next.
O trustworthy Brahmanas, I now ask you about my immediate duty. Please, after proper deliberation, tell me unalloyed duty of everyone in all circumstances, and specifically of those who are just about to die.
All of you are such dramatic readers. It's really a pleasure to hear. Kalakanta Prabhu mentioned that my parents did homeschooling and they used Srimad Bhagavatam as the basic text. And this is how we would read. We'd kind of read through a chapter, translations only, and then she would select specific purports for us to read to keep the story flowing and to get the broader context of what we're reading. And we'd stop in between and discuss and talk and ask questions and apply it to things that we were experiencing in our life or learning. So that system of reading and study is really wonderful, as in it really engages everyone who's hearing, and it's a traditional system of learning. This is essentially what these sages are doing, or will do, with Shukadeva Goswami. So anyway, that was a pleasure. Do we the verse? Okay, word for word also. Okay. Okay. Together meaning everyone says it together. Okay. So why don't we do the word for word together first, so you get the individual words. Otherwise, it's a little difficult to. This is a longer meter, so it's a longer verse. So let's do that together. And unto you, which is to be asked. Okay, now let's put it together in the verse. Tatascha vaprithyamimam vipriche vishrabhya vipra iti krityatayam sarvatmana mriyamanaischa krityam Shuddham cha tatramrishatabhiyukta tatascha vaprithyamimam vipriche vishrabhya vipra iti krityatayam Sarvatmana mriyamanaischa krityam Shuddham cha tatramrishatabhiyukta Tatascha vaprithyamimam vipriche Vishrabhya vipra iti krityatayam Sarvatmana mriyamanaischa krityam Shuddham cha tatramrishatabhiyukta Tascha vaprithyamimam vipriche Vishrabhya vipra iti krityataya Svatmana mriyamanaischa krityam Shuddham cha tatramrishatabhiyukta Tatascha vaprithyamimam vipriche Vishrabhya vipra iti krityataya Sarvatmanam Riyamanaischa Krityam Shuddham Chatakramrishatabhiyukta. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. O trustworthy Brahmanas, I now ask you about my immediate duty. Please, after proper deliberation, tell me of the unalloyed duty of everyone in all circumstances, and specifically of those who are just about to die. Purport. In this verse, the king has placed two questions before the learned sages. The first question is, what is the duty of everyone in all circumstances? And the second question is, what is the specific duty of one who is to die very shortly? Out of the two, the question relating to the dying man is most important because everyone is a dying man, either very shortly or after 100 years. The duration of life is immaterial, but the duty of a dying man is very important. Maharaj Parikshit placed these two questions before Shukadev Goswami also on his arrival, and practically the whole of the Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning from the 2nd canto up to the 12th canto, deals with these two questions. The conclusion arrived at thereof is that devotional service of the Lord, Sri Krishna, as it is confirmed by the Lord himself in the last phases of the Bhagavad Gita, is the last word in relation to everyone's permanent duty in life. Maharaj Parikshit was already aware of this fact, but he wanted the great sages assembled there to unanimously give their verdict on his convictions so that he might be able to go on with his confirmed duty without controversy. He has especially mentioned the word Shuddha, or perfectly correct. For transcendental realization or self-realization, many processes are recommended by various classes of philosophers. Some of them are first-class methods, and some of them are second or third-class methods. The first-class method demands that one give up all other methods and surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus be saved from all sins and their reactions. So there's certain stories that shape cultures, civilizations, in such a profound way that they're often regarded as classics of world literature, not just of a particular group of people or a specific community. Those stories, they're born in one particular area, but they grow, they spread, and they impact so much of the world. Many such stories exist in the world. We might think of the Gospels, for example, the life of Jesus, or we might think of the work of Shakespeare, like Hamlet, or we might think of the epic Ramayana. All of these stories have shaped cultures well beyond where they started. And this story that we're reading right now is one of those. The story of this king, Parikshit, who is cursed to die in 7 days and has a choice to make, which is, how do I respond to something that I cannot change, right? So this curse is invincible. And even if you it went out and tried to kill the person who cursed you, the curse itself would still continue its power, right? And so he had this choice to make. How am I going to respond? And his response, his decision at that point was so profound and so unusual for a human being that it became the seed of a story that has gripped people for thousands of years, that has shaped the course of civilizations. And I'm not exaggerating here. This is historically quite easily visible to someone who studies the history of this beautiful text, Srimad Bhagavatam. What was unusual about his choice was the fact that he chose not to resist something that every human being resists, at least for some time. Right? When faced with death, if we're given notice of death, then typically we go through a variety of stages in trying to deal with it. And those can include things like denial and anger and rejection and frustration and desperation, right? All of those are very normal human emotions. And such responses are found in the pages of these books from various people who respond in normal sorts of ways. But what's unusual is this king's response, which is so abnormal in a good way, right? He decides right away, he recognizes that if I can't change something, then I need to find a way to embrace it. And so that's exactly what he does. He goes to the banks of this river, Ganges, which we've just read, and decides that he's going to spend the last 7 days of his life in the best possible way that he can think of. Actually, he can't think of what the best possible way is yet. I mean, honestly, if we were given notice of death, right? It's very difficult to figure out what you need to do in that time. And the shorter the time, the more a sense of panic in that situation. How do you tell with all the priorities that exist in in one's lifetime? What's that one thing that you have time, desire, or interest to do when that's the last thing you'll ever do? And King Parikshit didn't know initially. All he knew initially was that life as it is could not go on, right? Like he couldn't continue with his day-to-day grind. That's the one thing he knew. That's the only thing he knew. And so he decided to go to a place where he knew he could find good advice, right? So that's two things he knows. He knows he doesn't want to continue what he's always done, because that wasn't getting him anywhere before. It's certainly not going to get him anywhere in the last 7 days of his life. And the second thing he knows is where to find good advice. And really, that's all that's required of us as human beings. We're not God. We're not all-knowing. We're not perfect. Right? We can't always make the right decisions. But when we're faced with a decision as profound, or even not as profound as he had, then these are the two things we're asked to do in such a situation. Is to ask ourselves, is my life at this moment, what I'm doing, is that worth continuing? Is that going to get me where I'm at, I want to be? And secondly, where can I get good advice? Right? Where can I get the right kind of association? And if we're adept at asking those two questions, we can make it through just about any circumstance. It won't be easy, it won't be simple. It's going to take work, but we can make it through. We can get through. And Srila Prabhupada in this commentary is making the point that all of us actually are faced with the same choice or decision that King Parikshit is. He's about to die in 7 days. We don't know when we're going to die, right? It could be 3 days or 6 or 7 or 100 years. But at some point or another, that's going to come, and we may or may not get notice of that. So these are the two things we ought to do, is examine our life and ask ourselves, if I continue with the ho-hum, with the rat race that I'm in, is that sufficient? Is that, if I die tomorrow, will I feel like I have lived a good life? Do I feel like I know where I'm going next? Do I recognize that I fulfilled my purpose? And if the answer to that question is no, then there's something that we need to change, right? That's what we learn from this king. There's something we need to change. We need to find the right people to help us figure that out. So even as I go through the day-to-day grind, I've got some purpose, I've got some goal, I've got a sense of meaning that I'm trying to achieve. There's three ways in which we might think of this rather frightening topic of death. It's something that no one really likes to think about. And we only think about it when we're trying to avoid it, right? That's kind of the extent to which we think of it. Avoid thinking of it as much as possible. And if you have to think of it, then think of it about in terms of how to prevent it. That's our modus operandi when it comes to death. And here, in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, which Prabhupada is saying from Canto 2 to Canto 12, is all about how do we die the good death, right? That's all it is. This whole book is about how do we die the good death. Because here's the thing. There's a million people in this world who will tell you how to live the good life, right? Come here tonight, go here today, do this, and you can be successful, you can be happy, you can flourish, experience this in this moment, delay that experience so you can experience this in the future. We've got all these plans, and anyone, any university professor, any career coach, any friend, any parent, anyone will tell you their opinion on how it is that you should live a good life. What we don't find is people who will tell us how to die a good death. Right? And that question is actually the question that drives us in this world. Right? Behind everything we do, any sense of urgency we have, why is it that we want to finish a college degree in 4 years and not linger forever? Why is it that we're concerned about getting through our bucket list of experiences that we want? It's because we know that our time is limited. We may not think about it, but that's the only thing that gives urgency to life in this world. It's the only thing that gives meaning. There was one famous philosopher, so famous I forgot his name, that he says the only reason that there is philosophy in this world is because of death. Right? It's because we know that there is some end to all of this and we want to find meaning before that end shows up. So this book is valuable for that reason. It's a guide on how to die a good death. And if you figure out how to die a good death, one side effect of that is you know how to live a good life. Right? That's what guides your life as well. And that's just a side effect of focusing on the big question, which is, how do I want to die? So there's three ways that we might think of it. For most people, death is a threat. It's an axe that hangs over us. At any moment, it can fall on us. We can be crossing the street and get hit by a car. We can be sitting in a living room and die of a heart attack, right? We lock our doors, we take out insurance plans, we arrange things to prevent that threat from showing up in our lives. And that's how most people think of death, right? As a threat that's constantly to be avoided. But for a yogi, someone who practices yoga, death can actually serve as an opportunity, as a vehicle of sorts to get to where you want to go next. This is described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 8, when he talks about the different ways of dying. And he gives a formula. He says, if you die at this time of the year, and you die at this time of day and this time of the month, and you focus yourself like this until you take up this posture, you can catch the flight to anywhere you want to in this creation. You can go to the moon. You can go to the sun. You can be reborn in a rich and wealthy family. You can essentially shape your future. For people like that, death is like going to the airport and finding a flight. Yes, it involves some separation from where you're leaving from, right? Leaving is difficult, and especially if you're leaving people behind whom you love. So goodbyes are always tough. But if you know where you're going, then you also have something to look forward to, combined with the pain of leaving what you're leaving behind. So for the average person, death is like being evicted from an apartment, right? The door's pulled off, you're thrown out on the street, you have no idea where you're going or what you're doing. And it's horribly traumatic. Right? It's painful because you don't know what's happening. And so you avoid it, right? That's for the average person. It's like eviction. For the person who's a yogi, it's an opportunity. It's like going to the airport to catch a flight. You're leaving something behind, but you have something in mind going forward. Socrates, he was very famous in this regard. He was a yogi of sorts. He was sentenced to death by the Greek political system for corrupting the youth. This was a standard accusation of philosophers throughout the world, actually. Philosophers have always been accused of corrupting the youth because they instill all these new ideas in their heads, right? And society depends on everyone doing the normal ho-hum life. That's what keeps things going. So they're very, so anyway, he was sentenced to death. He was given hemlock to drink. And his followers told him, we can get you out of this prison. We know a way out. We've got contacts. And you can go to a remote Greek island and you can live the rest of your days. Living the rest of your life on a remote Greek island sounds pretty good, right? But he refused. He said, I have no reason to run away from something that will follow me. He said, death is only scary for those who don't know what's on the other side. I know. He doesn't tell us what he knows, but he says, I know. So I'm not afraid. Give me the poison. This is the punishment I'm due, and I'm going to take it like a good citizen. So he was a yogi, right? Death was an opportunity to go somewhere he wanted. But there's one more. There's one yet better way to approach death. Not as a threat, not as an opportunity, but as an invitation. Think of travel not as you're evicted out on the street and you don't know where you need to go. Think of travel not as I'm boarding a flight, leaving my loved ones behind to go find my fortune in this world. Think of travel as the experience of coming home after a long journey away. A long journey where you have experienced things that are exciting and some things that are terrible, where you have experienced being thrown around and also experienced a sense of anticipation. You've been through it all. But now it's time to come home. Perhaps you've had this experience before. As a child, my family used to take us on long trips to India. And of course, I loved it there. It was fun and exciting, and family members who doted over us as children. But after a few weeks, I really wanted to come home, right? There's just something that just wasn't always sitting, well. And the journey home and opening the door and finding your bed I remember that experience so well, right? And the first thing you wanted to do is get into your bed and sleep, right? And there was just a sense of comfort. You knew that no matter what happened here, I'd be taken care of. For some like King Parikshit, death is that invitation to come home. It's Krishna saying, it's the Lord saying, okay, you've had a great adventurous journey. Now come home. And the journey's going to be long and no one likes that airplane seat and the food is terrible. But I promise you, once you get here, You're going to have your own bed. And it's going to be comfortable. And it's going to be wonderful. And I'll cook you whatever comfort food you want. Right? And for such a person, death is something to be embraced. It's not an artificial, kind of reasoning intellectual process. It's something that happens naturally. You open up your arms and you say, yes, I'll accept this. I'll just end by saying, this is not merely theoretical. I know of people who have been through this journey and who have gone through all the phases of seeing death as a threat, of seeing it as an opportunity, and ultimately as seeing it as an invitation. But here's the thing. To get to the point of death being an invitation, you have to start now. We have to start thinking of it now. We have to start shaping our lives in such a way that we can actually embrace it when the time comes. It doesn't happen automatically. I also know people who fight it till their last breath, for whom every last moment is painful and it's a war. And there's not enough time, there's not enough practice to shift the perspective on something that is inevitable. So we have to work on shifting that perspective now. And there are plenty of accounts of people who have done it successfully, not just in ancient times, like Maharaj Parikshit, but even in our own times. People who have embraced it as an invitation and who have left this world with a smile in their hearts. I'll stop there and see those comments, questions. Yes.
The invitation to go home to your own bed sounds so attractive. Why wait?
Yeah. This is a great question. There's the poet Yeats. He said that the only way out of a situation is through it. When we have a journey in this world, we're trying to get somewhere. We're trying to get home. To get home, we have to actually take the journey to get there. There's no shortcuts. There's no such thing as teleporting. You have to take that flight. You have to drive the car. You have to go through that experience. And it's only through that experience that we come to actually recognize the value of what we're receiving. Right? Like if I, on those trips to India, if I went and 24 hours later, my parents said, okay, time to go home, that bed is not going to be attractive to me, right? There were certain things I needed to experience. I needed to enjoy, I needed to suffer, I needed to find my way through. And it's only after that experience and what I learned through the process that I was ready to come home, right? So this world has a very, very important role in our lives. Our role, King Parikshit knows he's going to die in 7 days. He could have just, let's get this over with, right? The snake bird was going to bite him at the end of 7 days. He could have said, I'll find any random snake and make my bed with him, right? And that would be the end. In 24 hours, why wait for 7 days? Because it's the process of the 7 days, of getting there spiritually, emotionally, physically, learning what we have to in this world that prepares us to actually go where we need to go. It's not automatic. And this life is a preparation. And only the Lord can tell us the amount of time we need to prepare. We don't know that. We don't know what experiences will prepare us. And that's part of the excitement. That's the adventure, right? That when we engage in Krishna consciousness, life becomes an adventure because you don't know exactly what's coming. You kind of know. You don't know how long it is, but life is going to bring us through all of these journeys and experiences. And those journeys and experiences are valuable. And that's what will prepare us for returning home. Christine?
Thank you very much for class, Prabhu. If I may, I'd like to offer an interesting alternative interpretation of this text. And since I'm a philosophy grad student now, I'm here to corrupt the youth. I'm glad Kalakanta Prabhu is here to make sure I don't do too much damage. So So my idea is that King Parikshit is playing Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game where you have a dungeon master, and then you as a player, you create a character, and then in partnership with that dungeon master, the dungeon master kind of has a story and kind of like guides you through these different situations. And you as the player, you kind of inhabit your character, and then you make decisions, and that kind of like reveals the story. It's sort of collaborative storytelling, but with lots of rules and dice rolls. So what I'm getting from King Parikshit here is that he has the Atma behind King Parikshit, right? He has this character, and this character was blessed with this amazing heritage and this amazing kind of origin story. And then he kind of goes through and he kind of like maxes out all his stats. Like he kind of like does everything that you can do. He becomes like emperor of the world and is loved by everyone and keeps evil at bay by the time he's like 25. So he's kind of hit the top of his game. And then he has this encounter with the Muni, and he does this thing, and he's like, wow, like I'm kind of a jerk. Like this, I guess I'm kind of like bored with this character. Like there's kind of really nothing else to accomplish. And as a result, I was a jerk, and I did something that is really bad in the game. So in Dungeons and Dragons is a very theistic kind of game. There's lots of gods and mysterious forces that are greater than the player. And so it is very plausible that you have a D&D campaign, and if the player somehow chooses to offend one of these enormous metaphysical forces or gods or whatever, it's really going to screw them according to the rules of the game. This is like, there's a whole handbook and everything. So Parikshit goes, he acts like a jerk, and he's like, wow, I not only acted like a jerk, which is like, I don't really like that I'm doing that, but I also offended one of these enormous sources of power in the game. So obviously, the game is gonna, because of the rules of the game, I'm gonna get hit by something really bad. And so he's like, all right, you know what? I feel like I've like played, I've gotten what I wanted to out of it. I made the best character ever, and now it's kind of not fun for me anymore. I'm kind of acting in a way that I don't really like. So, and obviously, something's going to come and kill me. That's just the way the game works. Oh, it's a snake bird. Okay, great. I get it. Yeah. Okay. So, and then he goes to the bank of the river, right? And this river, as it notes, is this is where you go to die. This is also a theme in Greek mythology, right? You have the river of forgetfulness, and Charon ferries you across the river. So this river is like the place in the game where, when a character dies, the DM is like, okay, yeah, so you died, and then of course, you go to this river and you cross it, and then it's kind of the fiction of the game, and you have to make another character. So he's like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna go to the river and hang out because I'm gonna go there anyway. Why not? Just like save some time. So he goes to the river, and then he's like, okay, like, why do I have to wait 7 days? Like, why can't I just do it now? Come on, I want to end this character, and I want to start playing a new character, And then the DM is like, wait, no. I let you kind of have this amazing character arc and build this amazing character so that at this moment, you could have this special conversation, which results in this amazing book called the Bhagavad Purana, which will affect all the other players and all of history to come after you. And that is why you are not allowed to die now. And King Parikshit, of course, he trusts the DM. So he's like, all right, let's do it. And that is the moral of the story, that he trusts the DM. And because of that trust, he is just like, yeah, death, okay, fine, but we're going to keep playing after that.
That sounds excellent. That sounds wonderful. I mean that sincerely. The nature of a text like Srimad Bhagavatam is that it has many, many layers of meaning, and it can be understood and operated in so many different levels. This is why with a classic work like the Bhagavatam, we read it over and over and over again, and we read it together because there's many ways There's so many themes in the 24 verses that we read. Each one of them could be elaborated. The theme of regret and repentance that shows up several times. The theme of the river, the Ganga, and what that means. So you've pointed to so many very important themes in the story, and every one of them is important and crucial. So the picture that you painted, I think, is it hits all the right notes in terms of the story of the text. The other thing I learned is I need to play Dungeons and Dragons. sounds terrific. Okay, so there's a lot of hands here. Yeah, and we're at time, are we not? Okay, so maybe we stop here, and then I'll be here for breakfast. You have breakfast after this, right? Okay. So. If you have time. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind at all. Would you like to?
Thank you. Just a quick question. So you were mentioning that Krishna knows how much time we need to prepare ourselves for death. So can we infer from that those who get like a quick sentence, let's say they get terminally diagnosed and they're at stage 4 and they have a month to live, does that mean that Krishna knows that that's enough time? Because we hear this expression that God only gives what we can, how we can handle things. So I just wondered what your take on that.
He knows that it's enough time, at least in the current situation, right? So we understand that life is a cycle, and there's many opportunities to continue to grow. And so as we transition from one body to another, from one character in the game to another, then at that point, then we've got new things to learn and new places to experience. So perhaps it's all we need in this world before going home, or perhaps it's all we need in this character before we move on to the next. That only that person will know, right? We can't stand out here and go diagnose then. That's something Krishna tells us as we're going through that transition. What are you preparing for? What's the next step? Okay, thank you all so much for your attention. Hare Krishna.